friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to bring you another video in my Ways to Color Critters series. So if you're new to that, it's just a video series where I take one specific critter and show you how to color it in multiple different ways using my Copic markers and referring to my Copic color chart and my hex chart, which I keep in this little page protector. The reference charts themselves I keep in this photo album that I picked up at my local thrift store. It holds them perfectly. So I'll just flip through quickly and show you all of the videos that I've done so far. So if you are looking for new and interesting color combinations to use to color your favorite critters, you can go to that Ways to Color Critters playlist on my channel and look for the video that you would like, and you can create one of these reference charts for yourself. I actually find this really handy. I keep this on my desk off to the side along with my Copic coloring chart, and I use them all the time. So let's jump into today's critter. This is one that has been highly requested. I'm going to be doing bears using the Lawn Fawn Ugly and Bright stamp set. So I've stamped this image 8 times on a piece of Catherine Pooler Favorite White cardstock using Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. And we are going to jump right in with bear number 1. And I'm going to start with polar bears because polar bears are one of my favorite animals, and it is almost Christmas time, and so I just wanted to begin there. So I'm going to use some warm grays for this guy. I'm actually starting with that W3. I'm using W00, W1, W3, and W5, but that W5 will come into play later. I'm doing my shadows with the W3, adding them at the top of the head and the inner part of the ears, along the side of the face. I have them on the underside of the arms and along the body where those arms would be casting a shadow, and then between the legs and on the inner part of the feet. I also put a shadow beneath the muzzle to make that look like it is protruding out, and then I blended out with the W1 and added the W00 and left some of that plain white cardstock for a highlight. Then I'm going to use that W5, W3, and W1 to color the muzzle to be a little bit darker, just to make that stand out. Then I'll go ahead and jot down the numbers that I am using right below that image. Moving on to bear number 2, we're going to do a different version of a polar bear. This is one of my go-tos for polar bears, and that is E40, E50, and E51. Starting with the E51 this time for my shadows, laying those in the same places. I'm going to be coloring all of them with the shadows in the same places so that you can really contrast and compare the different combinations equally. I blended that out with the E50, and now I'm coming in with the E40 and softening that even further. But once again, I am going to leave some of the plain white cardstock showing. That is what makes your polar bear look white and just gives them a lot of dimension with the shadow shades. For this guy, I'm simply going to do his muzzle with the E51 and then the E50. Just use the 2 shades on that and then jotted down the numbers beneath. Moving on to bear number 3, we're going to keep the E50 and E51, but I'm going to add in E53 and E55. Now we're moving into the brown bears, and I'm going to start with a light brown. So I'm skipping over the E55 for now and doing my shadows with the E53, and then I am going to blend that out with the E51. This time I'm being a little bit more heavy-handed with that E51, carrying that color out a bit further because I'm not going to be leaving any white cardstock showing on this one since it's not a polar bear. So then I'll take that E50 and I'm going to fill him in completely. I'm using little circular scribbling motions to break up the edge of that E51 and fill him in. And then for his muzzle, I'm going to use the E55, the E53, and the E51, so it'll be just slightly darker than the rest of him. And of course, I'll jot down the colors that I'm using right beneath, so that if you'd like to make your own chart, you can do that as well. The next bear is also a brown bear, but we're going to move into a different color combo. I'm using E30, E31, E33, and E35. And this time I am going in right with that darkest color, that E35, and laying in my shadows. This one I'm kind of imagining could be like a grizzly bear. Actually, both the third and fourth bears could work for a grizzly. There are so many different types of bears that really the possibilities are endless, and that's why I did try to do as many as I could squeeze onto one sheet. This video was actually so highly requested that I've been meaning to do bears forever, but the typical bear stamps are usually too big to fit very many on a sheet, and I didn't want to change the size of the cardstock because it fits so perfectly in my color reference book. So finally came across this smaller bear from Ugly and Bright when I was pulling out some holiday stamps for a holiday card, and thought now is the time to do this because this guy fit perfectly on there. It is tiny bit cramped with the writing, but I think it works definitely better than the bears from Den Sweet Den, say, even though I love those bears. They're too big to fit very many on the page, like I mentioned. So I blended out with the E33 and the E31 and then used the lighter shades for his muzzle, and I'll jot those down. So we're halfway through already. Moving on to bear number 5, I'm going to go with another brown bear, but this one's going to be a little bit darker. I'm going to use E21, E23, E25, and E27. I'm going in with the E27 for my shadows and laying those in. And then I'm going to start blending out with the E25. When I'm using darker colors like this, I try to steer away from the eyes and any features that could get covered up, because if you can't make out the eyes especially, I feel like the image kind of loses its appeal. I think eyes are what make living creatures separate from inanimate objects. So if you lose the eyes, it kind of just becomes, something that's not living or relatable. So I always make sure to take the lightest shade that I'm using and use that to go over the eyes. So I'm doing that with the E23 and also filling in the rest of his body. And then I'm going to take the E23 and the E21 to fill in his muzzle. So this time we're going with a darker bear and a lighter muzzle just to mix it up a bit. And then of course I'll write down those numbers. So you can definitely stamp out any bear image that you have and color along with me and make a chart for yourself. I always get requests on these videos to make this a printable, which I cannot do. That would be illegal. These images do not belong to me. They belong to Lawn Fawn, and that would be stealing. So I'm definitely not going to do that. But we're moving on to bear number 6. And this time I'm going to go with some desaturated brown shades. I'm using E42, E43, E44, and E47, starting with the E47 for my shadows, and then I'm going to blend that out really well with the E44. That E47 is quite dark, and I want to make sure that I'm not leaving behind any harsh lines in that blend, because I want these bears to look soft and fuzzy. I don't want them to have, kind of like a separation from the outline to the rest of their body. And then I'll come in with that E43, and again I'm going to use that little circular motion to break up the E44 and kind of pull it into the highlight area and just fill in the rest of his body. I really like this combo for bears as well. I think it just looks very realistic. even though he is just a really cute little cartoony bear. And then for his muzzle, I'm going to use the E43 and the E42. I'll try to squeeze in those numbers down below. I maybe should have done the muzzle on the line beneath, but I was just afraid that it would look too crowded. So if you're doing your own chart, feel free to do the muzzle colors separate. Moving on to bear number 7, I am going to do a black bear, although it's more of a dark gray bear. But I went with W1, W3, W5, and W7. And again, I'm just using the darkest 3 shades for the main part of the body. So I started with the W7. If you wanted him to be a little bit darker, you could go in with the W9. The W9 is just so dark though that I just didn't want to go quite that far. But it's definitely an option. I blended out the W7 with the W5. And then I'm going to come in with the W3 and again do those little circular scribbling motions to break up the edge of the previous shade. I do not go over all of the coloring completely. That could cause bleed out with the light color kind of pushing out the dark. I'm just going over the very edge of the previous shade. And I did do a second layer off screen to smooth him out. Sometimes I leave that in because it is helpful, but I just had so many critters to cover today, and I really want to keep these videos to 15-16 minutes tops so that they work as a quick reference guide for you to refer to again and again whenever you need a new color combo. So we've reached our 8th and final bear, and this one is going to be another black bear. I'm using N3, N5, and N7. That N7 is super dark though, so you'll see that this one turns out a bit darker than the previous one. So I'm using that to lay in my shadows, and then I'm going to come in with the N5 and start to blend that out. I'm laying down that N5 a little bit heavier than I would have to do with lighter shades. The darker shades just tend to leave those harsh lines behind more often. So I'm just working my way around to make sure to break that up. And then I'll come in with the N3 to fill in the rest of his body. I really, really love this combo. Actually, I think this one ended up being one of my favorites. By the way, I was going to include pandas on this chart until I realized that I've already done a video on 6 ways to color pandas. So if you are looking for that video, go ahead and refer to that Ways to Color Critters playlist. But I am going to do his muzzle in brown. A lot of black bears have a brown muzzle, so I thought that this was fitting. And then this time when I jot down the colors, just so there's no confusion, I'm going to put the black shades on the first line and then the muzzle shades on the second line. To finish these guys off, I'm going to give them some rosy cheeks. This is an extra step that you don't have to do, but I always do on my critters. I just think it makes them look so cheerful and happy. So I'm going to use some cool toned pinks for the bears in the top row. I thought the cool tones were fitting with the polar bears. So I'm using RV10, RV11, and RV13. My RV13 likes to leak, so that's why I pulled off both caps. But I'm starting with the RV13, blending out with the RV11, and then adding a little bit of that RV10 on the outer edges to smooth it into the rest of their fur tone. And then for the bear on the end, I did a second layer of that RV13 to make it stand out since he was a bit darker. For the second row of bears, I'm going to use R11, R20, and R22. Although they're quite dark, so I barely use the R11. You'll see in just a sec. But I'm going to do 2 layers of that R22 so that it really stands out against their darker fur. And then I'll blend around the edges with the R20 to just soften that into the fur. And then I did add just a touch of that R11 on 2 of the bears, but I could see it really wasn't doing much, so you could probably just leave that out for these combos. But there you have it, guys. There is 8 ways to color bears. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one. I had a lot of fun making this chart, and I know I'm going to refer to it again and again. Let me know if you want me to carry these ways to color critters videos into 2026. It's been a little while since I did my last one. It was back in August, so let me know if that's something you want to see continue on this channel. And let me know what critter I should do next. If so, go ahead and hit that like button if you did enjoy it, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. The supplies I used will be listed and linked in the description bar below in case you'd like to pick anything up. And if you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you would also enjoy. You can click on either one to check them out. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. I hope you had a good one, and I'll see you soon in the next. Bye-bye.